the people closest to the problem usually they see it the most clearly, and they have to be at the table.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. Well, I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Dr. Eric Racine. Eric is a senior corporate affairs leader who operates at the intersection of reputation, public policy, patient access, and innovation, all in service of better outcomes for patients. He's the vice president and head of U.S. Public Affairs and Patient Advocacy at Sanofi, where he works across advocacy, government, medical, and business leaders to help shape the conditions that allow science to reach patients faster and more fairly. Now, before we start, there are a few things I think you should know about Eric. First, he understands influence as a system, not a function. Over more than 2 decades, he's worked alongside patient advocates, providers, policymakers, payers, and executives, and he's seen that lasting impact comes from trust, credibility, and alignment, not titles or volume, which we'll talk about today. Second, he brings rare range. Eric began his career as a clinical pharmacist, giving him firsthand insight into patient care and access barriers. He later moved into senior leadership roles spanning public affairs, enterprise strategy, policy, and much more. That was both in North America and globally. This experience has shaped how he thinks about risk, trust, and building long-term value. And third, Eric builds forward. He is the creator and host of Patient Advocacy Voices, a platform focused on real-world influence in healthcare systems. He's also actively exploring how technology and AI can support smarter decision-making, strengthen partnerships, and improve patient access without losing human judgment. Eric, you have been called a leading voice at the intersection of policy, access, and patient trust, a National Health Council board member, a PharmD, an executive MBA, and a podcaster. Today, we're really proud to call you a chief influencer. Welcome to the show.
Well, welcome, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me to your show. Clearly, it's an honor to be here. I'm grateful to you, to the team at Social Driver for inviting me, the George Washington University College of Professional Study, the Communication Board. I've been a long time listener to your podcast. Every episode I'm listening to, I always get something that sharpens how I think about leadership and influence. I'm very happy and privileged to contribute today.
Well, thank you. I love hearing that. That makes me so happy. And I'm sure you're not surprised then that we wanted to feature you. And we've been working on getting this scheduled for a bit. I'm really excited about it because you just do such a great job showing up with your personal brand to reach the patient advocacy community. But there's so much more than that. That's one dimension of what people might see if they listen to your podcast or if they follow you on LinkedIn. So I thought just to start, tell us why you do what you do. What originally pulled you toward patient access, patient advocacy? Give us a little bit more of the backstory.
Yeah. What drives me, my why.
Yes.
For me, access to medicine, having access to medicine it's very deeply personal. That drives me. I truly believe that the medicine that are produced today and the vaccine are almost like a little small miracle. I've seen when people access them and the benefit they can have, but also I've seen when people don't have access to them, what can happen. So that's what drives me. And when I was a little younger, a little personal side, my brother and my sister both had a rare disease and there was no treatment at the time.
Wow.
And I've seen the suffering that they had, and they passed away both, but also the suffering on my parents, that has truly changed them forever. And so very early in my life, I've seen the difference between someone not having access to medicine and someone having access to medicine. And that experience shaped me everything. I became a pharmacist. I I'm from Canada, originally from Quebec, so the accent you hear a little bit here is that French Canadian accent. But I also moved to the U.S., did doctorate, and train and work in different place in the Midwest in the U.S. And that I've seen also what access to medicine can do or not. And after that, in the pharmaceutical industry, across multiple function in the U.S., globally, always this aspect of this truth that innovation only becomes progress when patient can access it. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. And my work sit at this intersection. You said it very well about innovation, policy, and patient access. Because all the hard work of the people who try to bring innovation, it doesn't really matter if patients don't reach them.
Yeah, 100%. And your own story, of the personal loss that you and your family experienced. I mean, especially with two siblings, that is just so heartbreaking. You
Yeah.
described sort of the ripple effect of how it affected everyone in the
Yeah.
family. And when I think about patient access and what you're talking about, you can also create ripple effects that are positive ripples that affect families in a great way. And I wonder if you can think back on your career. I mean, I know a bit about it, and it's just you have had quite an amazing journey. Um, what's a moment or moments that fundamentally reshaped the way you think about patients and systems and that access that you described?
Yeah. Very early in clinical settings, I worked for many years in the hospital system in the U.S. and Canada, but in the U.S. and in Detroit. Um, in that clinical setting, seeing real life, what happened, and it really taught me a lot. And I bring that all the time in the work that I do. You see that these promise and the barriers at the same time. You know, you can have. I remember we had incredible treatment for people, and available for patient, but they still struggle. And sometimes it was not because of the technology or the knowledge of the healthcare team. It was truly about basic struggle, like transportation or patient not having access to some basic sh- support from other human because of the condition that they lived in. So to me, when I think about patient care and all the hard work that everyone is doing, this whole aspect of the whole patient is critical.
Take us back to the time you spent in Detroit. I'd love to hear more about what that experience was like.
Oh, very formative and amazing work. It changed a couple of things. First, you see healthcare being delivered, and you learn a lot and work with very, very smart people and meet amazing people. But also form my leadership too, um, because when you are back then, we didn't have like iPhone or uh, anything in our pockets. It was what we knew in our brain. So when you think about influence and you're a clinician and you work across multidisciplinary team of nurses, physicians, and other people and pharmacists all working trying to help patients. At that time, I believe in my mind that influence and how to make an impact was truly to be the smartest people in the room. That was to me, the more information and knowledge you had, you were able to carry a decision, carry a movement. And it was very important to how you show up in front of the patient or how you show up with others. So to me, at that time, it was all about performance. It was all about being the smartest person in the room. And that changed a lot when I joined larger organization and work across multiple large stakeholders. So that has been a very formative, and also I see how I evolve in my approach from this time to now where we are.
And a lot of folks who work in healthcare, they may have only been in the direct healthcare. They could be in a corporate office or they could be in a, hospital setting. But what I think's kind of interesting about your journey, a little bit of what I learned from you, I think maybe it was during your sabbatical year, is that you were really out with the patients outside of the healthcare setting, and you learned some things about how to make sure, the interventions are effective. Can you
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So we're doing a lot of project, the pharmacist and the physician and the nurse, the commitment of at the time of the system, and still today was tremendous. And I had this beautiful opportunity at the time to the leadership there allowed me the opportunity to focus on how to do clinical improvement and to more of a system or more like a city. And we did that in cardiovascular, anticoagulation, and so on. But I do remember that vivid experience where we had like pharmacists, we had nurses, we had protocols, we had system to take care of people. And we were looking into the problem we're trying to solve was patients were getting readmitted too fast about a condition. And we were trying to improve that. And it was the right thing for the patient, it was the right thing for the system, it was the right thing for everybody. And we had like knowledge and technology, we had process, everything worked well. But we were not showing an outcome improvement. And we were scratching our head. Why was that? And it's when we spend time actually in the patient home and trying to understand their journey better that we realize at the end it was not an issue of innovation or knowledge of the doctor or instruction. It was a basic human need. We were asking them to weigh themselves. And some of these patients did not have a scale at home. So it was such a simple thing. And after that, we just started to give the scale for free. And because the patient had to weigh themselves in this case. And that was a big haha moment for me to we assume things. We are in everything that we do. It can be around a meeting room or in policy or anything that you do. This human factor is so critical. And that moment taught me that if you're trying to find a solution for someone, always bring the people who you're trying to impact at the table with you. You will learn tremendously.
I think that's such a great insight because sometimes, especially if we have a lot of expertise, especially if we have a lot of training, um, we might assume we know what the solution to the problem is, but sometimes it's a little bit different than we understood. And I know something that I've heard you say before is that, some of the best leadership lessons come from the people who don't have a title or don't have any authority, but they still change systems. I wonder if you could dive into that a little bit more, because I think that's a great insight, not only for patient advocacy, but for any leader.
I was mentioning that a little earlier about the aspect of I heard in my early in my career, I really thought that knowledge and maybe position was so important to influence and to carry the room. But what I've soon very fast realized, and by the way, I'm work in progress like we all are. I'm learning every day, and that's what I love. Podcasts like yours is I'm evolving. And but one thing that I've learned from a stakeholder, a group of stakeholder that have taught me the most are really the patient advocate. And this is why we have that podcast called Patient Advocacy Voices. But the patient advocates to me are such a unique type of influencer and leader. It has been the most rewarding part of my career. They keep things real. In corporate environment, it's very easy to sometimes be abstract or in Washington, D.C. or in policy circle. But the patient advocate brings you straight to the point of care, to what patients are actually experiencing. Sometimes they are mothers or fathers of patients themselves, or kids who have a disease, or they are patients themselves. They bring that clarity, and they're relentless, they're grinding. To me, they are an amazing group, and I encourage everyone to truly work and support them. And they don't stop fighting because they're fighting for real people. And really, one key lesson that stuck with me, and this is what we were mentioning before, Anthony, is that the people closest to the problem usually they see it the most clearly, and they have to be at the table.
Absolutely. You talk about the patient advocates, what you've learned from them, being close to the problem, and some other lessons. I think it's worth just refreshing our what we said in the bio here that you launched patient advocacy voices. And it's really unique because it's a show where you feature different patient advocacy leaders. And, for folks who aren't in that world and aren't familiar with it, these are, by and large, folks who run organizations that represent a specific patient group that has a condition or a disease. So they are what you just described, very close to the problem. They are the ones that have the most access and the connection, the relationship. They're listening every day to patients in that world. Um, Say a little bit more about what it's been like to launch that. Why did you launch it? What have you learned from it? Because I think it's certainly, as we think about chief influencers and your ability to build that community, is absolutely a standout element of how you show up to influence in the world.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we're very proud of Patient Advocacy Voices. It's a platform that we created at Sanofi. And our goal, we want to elevate the patient advocacy leaders because we're so amazed about the work that you do. And also capture what they have learned the hard way through their work and their journey. And the goal is that others they will get to know them, but it can be also inspire. And also they will learn something, even if it's one or two or three things per episode, so that themselves, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Because it is a complex work to try to improve patient care. And if you can learn one or two things, then you speed up your own impact. So that's the goal. It's this sharing, this community, so elevating everybody. So across these interviews we have some themes that keep coming up consistently. Like one, for example, is trust is everything.
Mm.
The other one that I use all the time is the clarity about the problem and the outcomes matter much more than activities and volume. So to be very clear about what you're trying to solve and very clear what you're trying to achieve. And the third one that keep coming up over and over, it's that progress only happen if you work in partnership across people. It's not about heroics. You think about patient advocacy, you may think about heroes or single person trying to shape the system. And that's true. But most of the impact, the biggest impact, is always when people work together. Because the problem that we are trying to solve, that it can be in healthcare or in geopolitical or through culture, they are way too big for one stakeholder to try to solve. And we have to work truly together. So that's what the Patient Advocacy Voices platform we have created. We're really, really proud about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope folks will go listen to it because I think you've done some incredible interviews elevating those stories. And I love that you've been able to pull out those themes that are I think kind of worth repeating
Yeah.
because any leader can learn from those. So number one, you have to build trust, right? Without
Yeah.
that foundation of trust, you can't make any change. Number two, you have to have clarity about the problem. And as
Yeah.
you said, getting closest to the people who really understand, who are in it, that's where you're going to get the best clarity about the problem.
Yeah.
And then third, partnership. Partnership is so important for progress. And so if we think about those being kind of pillars of how patient advocates show up and what works, I'd love to think about how do we translate that philosophy into action? What are some behaviors you've seen from great advocates that executives and leaders in other fields might be able to learn? What can they learn from patient advocates as they're trying to build trust, as they're trying to get clarity on the problem, and as they're trying to build partnerships? What are you seeing from these patient advocates that you are working with so closely?
Yeah. Yeah. I, I will say the first one is I've learned a lot through them, and I've learned it through my own journey too, and in watching in action some of the leaders that I've had the privilege of working with and learning with in at Sanofi or across the healthcare system is this aspect of being present and remove the pressure from trying to perform. I was mentioning that it was earlier in my career, I really thought about that performance was so important. And so I had to know everything and I need to show up and don't show a crack, like know it all and rehearse my line and trying to remember that. And to sound polished, am I right? To sound like you know what you were doing. But I was quite surprised to see that as I evolve over the years, as I'm work in progress over the years, is that some of the biggest leaders, and including and especially the patient advocacy group, is they have that aspect of being present instead of performing. So so it's about this. Sometimes they just are very clear on the problem, but they don't know all the solution to achieve this. But they're there, they're listening. They always bring it back to the problem that they're trying to solve. In this case, it can be we need a medication for this disease, or we need patient to have access to this disease, or so on. So I like to remind myself that that's one of the key learning I've had over the years is you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to be clear about what you're trying to solve and bring the people around the table with you and listen to people.
That's great. Um, I know we've talked a little bit too about how do you align the room.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could share a little bit about what you've seen and kind of also your style around that.
Yeah. 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 Sometime the podcast is called Chief Influencer. Sometimes I feel like it's almost like I'm becoming more of a chief aligner or a chief integrator in a way, because how do you actually align people in complex situation is critical. And I've learned two things. The first thing is you have to align on the problem you're trying to solve. And it sounds simple, but many, many times you realize you're around a table with people talk about solution and people are debating about solution when they're not even clear about the problem. Most people are trying to solve for different problems and they are in the same room. So don't assume that everybody is clear. Talk about it. Talk about it a lot until you're very clear. The second one is be very, very clear about what is the outcome you're trying to achieve and agree what success looks like. Force people to say, hey, in 12 months, in 24 months, what are the conditions that needs to be true that we will say we have succeeded? And again, people have assumption of what they believe success will be like. But when you put that on a table and you debate it, you fast realize that people were trying to aim for different goal. One was shooting for the moon, one was shooting for Mars. So when people are clear on both, problem you're trying to solve and where we're going to go, I found that collaboration improve, creativity, and it brings the performance from people. They become more aligned and they try to be more present to try to solve the problem.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I think that's such a great insight because you may assume that everyone has the same outcome in mind, but in fact, the outcomes, one step forward from where you are today, they might all be aligned, but 10 steps forward, the moon and Mars is a good example, right? In both cases, you have to get off the ground, but then beyond that, you're pointed in different directions.
That's right.
And I think taking the time, which is so difficult these days because everything seems to be moving so fast, that pause and come back and align. I think that that's really important. And how do you as a leader remind people to do that when everybody feels like they just have to keep moving and that sometimes it doesn't seem like there's time to pause and align?
Yeah. You just have to, it's often we constantly feel that life is a sprint and this situation is the worst that it's ever been. And today we need to solve that. It will be much better tomorrow. I hope that most people know I've seen over the last few years that it's not the truth. Am I right? The wave of change and the frequency of change and the speed of evolution and transformation is breakneck speed. I've not
Yeah.
seen it this way before. And we just have to be, as leaders, you have to be that lighthouse in a storm
Yeah.
and to say, let's take a pause here. And I know it feels really, really bad right now and very hot, and we all want to solve that, but we're playing the long game. And I will say that it's even more important now that trust is the main currency that we need to all aim for.
Yeah. So speaking of trust and this world of patience, we all hear the term patient-centric or patient centricity a lot. And in fact, we hear it so much that not everybody who's saying it could be doing it because, then everything would be, perfect. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how do you think well-intentioned leaders might miss the mark on patient centricity? And what do you advise them to do if they truly want to put patients at the center? And I think, you've already shared some advice on this that you may harken back to, but I wanted to get a finer point on patient centricity right now.
Yeah, thank you. This is an important concept, this aspect of patient centricity. Any company that you work in or any function that when you're working with people.
Mm.
So everyone in healthcare, that you're a hospital, that you're a provider, that you're a biopharmaceutical company working hard to find new treatment, a payer, anybody that you will be in healthcare, we say we're patient centric. Now, the issue that I find that I've learned over the years is that sometimes it's become like performance. It's a language. I'm patient centric. I have pictures of patients and I say it. But instead of being a discipline, a way of thinking. So clearly in healthcare, you have to be patient centric. But what does it mean at the end of the day to be truly patient centric? And it means truly involving the patients and the people who work for it, like advocates and caregiver, early enough to help define the problem you're trying to fix. Like you need a new cure, you need a new treatment, or you need a new solution. But to help them co-develop with you. But not just having them just be, when you come up with something, asking them their opinion. That's different. That would be more market research and so on. But it's really to work very early with them. So understand the problem from their point of view so you can up solving the problem the right way for them.
That requires you to do it earlier in the process than some people. Sometimes folks might come up with a solution and say, hey, what do you think of my solution? And what I hear you talking about, Eric, is you have to start the process much earlier for it to work.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to start very early. You have to listen. You have to act on what you're listening. And sometimes you have to lead for them. Sometimes some of the insights you're gathering may not be very popular internally, but you have to truly lead for them. And at Sanofi, if I may say, we've been very intentional about moving patient engagement from this language, this performance, to truly acting on it. And shameful plug to the Patient Advocacy Voices podcast. We have an episode on that. It's called the Patient Community Promise. And to your point of working very early on, so we have a clear signal to this commitment. We have the patient insights are embedded in 100% of our clinical trials, 100% of our regulatory submission. And we also work to make it easier for people across the company to partner, to be able to listen and act on some of these insights. So this is important, is if you say you're patient-centric, make it simple for people to be able to do this and actually incorporate it into your operation.
And I think not only is that a great lesson for healthcare and anyone working with patients, but for any leader that's working with a group that's outside of their organization, it could be in education and students, or it could be something else. Um, Thinking about, well, how do we involve that group in the process early? How do we
Yeah.
build those partnerships, build trust? You've mentioned trust several times,
Yeah.
so that we can get clarity on the problem and then align on the desired outcomes that we want. And I think for a lot of leaders I speak to, they realize, we do that some, but we actually may need to reinvent the way that we engage with those groups. And certainly technology, just like your podcast is one example of it, has given us new and exciting ways that we can build those relationships. We can do Zoom focus groups, we can do survey, there's all kinds of things we can do today that we couldn't do that long ago. So I think your lesson here, I just wanted to underscore it. It's a really great one for any leader, not just leaders in healthcare, but especially important when it comes to healthcare and putting patients at the center.
Yeah.
Want to switch gears a little bit. So you serve on the board of a group that, as you know, I'm a big fan of, the National Health Council. And what's kind of unique about that organization, it's over 100 years old, but it's consensus driven. And they're very focused, of course, on patient centricity and patient engagement. Um, you spoke earlier about alignment. And when we think about alignment, having a lot of organizations with different priorities all under one tent that have to make decisions through a consensus, I mean, it almost seems impossible these days, because everyone, of course, has their own needs. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about alignment versus authority, and what you have seen and observed being in a leadership role with an organization like that has so many stakeholders, but that's focused on consensus.
You take NHC, National Health Council, Randy Ruda is the CEO, and the board and all the staff there are truly amazing organization. They do a lot of work. They're not considering themselves a coalition per se, but I think it's a good analogy to think about it as a coalition. And it's people who truly are working together, sharing their insight and their expertise, and trying to improve the health of patients in the U.S. And I've worked with many coalition, and NHC is it's an amazing organization. But I think your point is what makes a coalition in a way thrive while many others fade or may not work. And you mentioned a few things, Anthony, is what I've seen work. It's not the passion. So because everybody's passionate, am I right? Everybody's passionate. Everyone want to do it. The first meeting always works super well, and everybody wants to work together. But it's the discipline of a coalition. So I see a few things. And NHG is doing that very, very well, and others are doing that very well. First, you have to have a shared purpose and a clarity of the goal. We talked about this before. The problem we're trying to solve, the goal we're trying to, that is so important. After that, the aspect of trust. Trust is gain, get to know people, but it's sustained collaboration. Trust is a long-term skill. It's very, very important, and trust is the most critical thing in healthcare today. The other one is really this inclusion of these diverse voice, and every voices matter, and you have to give them weight. And if someone doesn't speak up, or one of the group doesn't speak up, seek them, include them at the table. Make sure you listen to what they're saying, especially the patient voice, as we talk about. It's the same thing as bringing the patient voice early on, but in this case, it's people who represent different kind of group, different underserved people can be people who are underprivileged, or people who are coming from different geography, or people coming from different ethnicity. Bring the people to the voice. And after that, execution excellence. People say often the strategy is the most important thing. I will agree, but the execution, this is where a lot of coalition fail. And this is when you turn this alignment, or what the problem is, and to try to reach your outcome, is the execution excellence. So with this aspect of the world is changing fast, things are working fast, coalitions are critical. Progress happen when we all working together.
Yeah. And in today's world, obviously we have to build personal relationships when we're part of a group, a board, a coalition, right? Because those personal relationships and getting to know one another, it, helps to build that trust, and it allows you to have those conversations. Um, as you and I are both big fans of LinkedIn, and one of the great things about LinkedIn is it allows you to keep relationships up even when you aren't together in person. And we talked a little bit earlier about sort of polish and performance versus showing up authentically. Do you find that, being part of a coalition, for example, having that LinkedIn presence and being able to keep tabs on what people are doing and, connect in that way, do you think that's a tool that helps leaders build and maintain trust today?
I I do, I think LinkedIn is an amazing tool, and I use it, and connect, get to know what people are doing, get to know people. I don't know how we were doing it before LinkedIn. So absolutely yes. And I think also in LinkedIn, some people, and it's this aspect of that presence versus performance
Mhm.
angle that you're hitting on. Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes we can do some, we can be pushed at doing this performance to look like everything is perfect in our life, everything is perfect on everything that we do, and humble bragging that some people can do. And this is all the social media, by the way. This is not just LinkedIn, especially important on LinkedIn because it's a professional network. But I do believe that people need to show their unique self too. And that means that you don't have all the answers. And you need to elevate others. You need to ask the questions. So I do believe that people who are doing it right are hitting that balance very, very well.
Yeah, we have some great examples of those other leaders through Chief Influencer, who I know of at least one who's also been featured on Patient Advocacy Voices, Chuck Henderson from the American Diabetes Association. But I just wanted to mention him, one of our past guests, and check out the episode if you haven't listened to it yet for our listeners. But um, that example of showing up where you're telling your story, you're representing a brand, but it's not overly polished,
Yeah,
being authentic, sharing that photo when you're, out with the team or, in his case, from back when he was playing basketball and just helping people feel like they get to know you
yeah,
between that annual event maybe where they see you. I found
mm,
that has become a superpower for a lot of leaders to really connect with people. And it's growing. And I think it's especially exciting to see patient advocacy leaders and the folks that you interview on Patient Advocacy Voices doing that, because it allows them to get the message out about the patients they represent to a much broader audience than they would be able to otherwise.
yeah, yeah. Chuck Anderson, the ADA is a beautiful experience. I follow him, and I like his comments. I like to comment on his posts. He's doing it very well.
Eric, I want to ask you about technology a little bit and just, generative AI. It's really accelerating the pace of work. We're reading about how AI is incredible in terms of innovating in healthcare and in the pharmaceutical industry, but also in terms of how we create content and how leaders can, show up. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I think about is how can we use AI to build trust? One of the things that, you've underscored several times, but how do we ensure that we don't lose trust or lose that human touch? Because if we lose the humanity, then certainly it's difficult to build trust. Um, what have you been thinking about when it comes to AI?
Oh, big fan. I've did some the last few years since ChatGPT. I mean, I heard about AI before because we use artificial intelligence in R&D and in science, but generative AI since ChatGPT became public, I've been a big fan. And now we have so many LLMs and been studying it. I've been also applying it to my work. And I find there's an amazing opportunity in front of us for AI to truly discover new medication or patient having access to them, educating. Big fan of AI. So let's start with this. I do understand some of the risk, and I do understand the importance of ethics in AI. So, in the policy and the geopolitical aspect of AI, financial and potential impact on employment. So, I understand all of that. But I do truly believe that AI is here to stay. It's quite important. And I do believe that a human plus AI is more impactful than just a human. So let's put it this way. I do not believe that AI will replace human. I do believe that AI will replace some task that we do, but it will not replace human in the work because of that human element. And to me, as technology speed everything up, information is flowing, the aspect of creation and content is flowing. The human parts to me matters even more than before.
Mm.
And if you had to look into a successful professional before where the IQ, the knowledge, and we talk about that when I work in a hospital system and so on, the IQ, the knowledge, the raw, was what was a premium. Moving forward, it's going to be even more the judgment of the person, the trust, the listening, the more the EQ side, emotional intelligence side of the thing. So AI has a great opportunity already. We're seeing it. We're starting to see in some parts some of the outcomes and the impact it does. It reduces friction. It's speed the learning, but it cannot replace the credibility and the presence of a human. And the future of influence to me belongs to these leaders and people like you, leaders across all the network of people who can align people, and align system, just not the people to process information faster because we have machines that can do that.
I think that's absolutely right. And something that I, have been saying is in this world of artificial intelligence, let's not forget the other AI, which I call authentic influence.
Yeah, yeah.
And in a world where
I
anybody can
love
write
that.
something in record speed, right? It's like
Yeah,
easier for people to post. So it's not about the volume of content anymore. How do you really connect?
yeah.
And the people who figure that out and maintain that, the organizations that prioritize that authentic influence, I think are the ones that will rise to the top, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
And can I borrow that's the
Please,
definition?
Eric, and where I live in Washington, D.C., we have sort of a saying. The first time you repeat it, you can say, as my friend Anthony always says. Then the second time you can say, as my friend always says. And then the third time you can say, as I always say.
I love that. I
So
love that.
that's a little Washington thing that
Mm.
happens. But no, absolutely. I'm telling everybody, yeah, let's talk about authentic influence. Let's not, I love AI too, but let's not forget about the importance of authentic influence and perhaps more important than ever. And on the topic of influence, I do want to ask just one final question as we close out. Chief Influencer is all about influence, and we feature incredible leaders like you who have these amazing personal and professional journeys. When you think about influence today, how do you define it, and how has that definition changed for you, if at all, over your career?
To me, influence today is about that aspect of that presence. It's about to be the chief, like aligner, integrator. Um, it's about clarity. It's about trust. It's about helping people that you work with seeing the real problem, the problem we're all trying to solve, to really ask the hard question and work hard to define that. Agree together, align people to agree on where we're going, what is what good looks like, and the person who can move people to all work, move together. That's
Mm.
to me what influence is today. It is not what I thought it was when I started my career, where I thought it was the hero, top performer who knew everything about everything.
I love that answer. And as I think about our conversation today, Eric, several things stuck with me, but alignment. Alignment is one of the key words, the importance of alignment around influence. And you shared um, your powerful, personal story and how loss influenced your um, focus on healthcare and patients. And you gave a great example from earlier in your career that just reinforced the lesson that you shared with us moments ago, which is um, having the best idea, having the highest IQ, being the loudest, being the most innovative. Well, that didn't actually solve the problem when the patient didn't have a $10 scale at home to weigh
That's right.
themselves.
That's right.
And really understanding what the problem was key. And so I sort of leave here today with almost like an Eric framework in my mind. At the beginning, I was thinking of it as linear, but as you talked, I realized it's almost maybe three, pie pieces that fit together because they aren't linear, but they're trust. You have to build that trust. It's a foundation and you can't accomplish anything without it. The second piece is that clarity on what the problem is. If you can't get everyone aligned on what the problem is, then you can't get aligned on your outcome and where you want to go. And that's very important too, clarity of the outcome. Often the piece we miss, though, is getting to the individuals who are closest to the problem and who understand it. The person in the home that doesn't have the scale, for example, and you never get to know that if you're only in a clinical setting, for example. And then third, partnership. Partnership is so important for progress. I'm a big believer in that myself. And I think that, everything that we have to do today in a connected world that's more connected than ever is we have to figure out what that partnership looks like. And yeah, we might sometimes partner with AI to turn those notes into an
Yeah.
abstract quicker,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's all with that focus on the outcome. We partner with other organizations and find our common interests. But key to that is we have to keep the humanity. We have to keep the authenticity as part of that. And I think alignment is a really great word to think about when we talk about influence. And you've used that several times because without that alignment, we just don't move forward at all. So, Eric, it was just been such a pleasure to speak with you today. I hope folks will pay attention to you on LinkedIn, but also check out your amazing podcast, Patient Advocacy Voices, where you have featured some incredible leaders and helped pull insights from them about the world of patients. And I thank you for the wisdom that you shared with us today. And we're so happy to recognize you as a chief influencer.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. This was really good discussion. Thank you.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.